Hello, everyone, and welcome to War of the Stars, a Star Wars podcast. Come to you, as always, from deep within the Outer Rim, far beyond the watchful eyes of the Galactic Empire. Joining me is trying to test out his light, make sure his lightsaber is working.
Hey, I'm not risk averse, but I am Garrett K. Jones. How's it going, everybody?
It's going good. Also,
greetings, citizens of the Galactic Empire. Brian Karasik here. Glad to be back. Good to see you guys.
It's been one of those days.
Oh, it has indeed.
Aren't
it has
they all?
indeed. Yes. Well, we are back after another week, and it is the first week of the month, which means it is Lore Week. And today, we're going to be talking about the Guardians of Peace and Justice and the Republic, the Jedi Order.
Yes, the Jedi.
Okay, good night, everybody.
Well, I think it would be.
What specifically do you want to talk about with regards to the lore of the Jedi, John?
Well, let's start with the Jedi Creed first of all, so we can kind of get a look at that.
Let me grab my Jedi Path copy. Hold on.
Uh-oh.
While Garrett retrieves that, I don't think any Star Wars fan, no matter what side they come down on it, as the Palpatine guy in the room, you would expect I would not have a good impression. But I think any Star Wars fan has never appreciated the beautiful lore created. For me, it was when Kenobi describes the lightsaber, a weapon of a bygone age, and the way he scoffs at blasters as just being, I forget the exact line, but it's as a D&D kid who also loves science fiction, the Jedi are the perfect combination of Arthurian legend and space lightsaber.
All right, let's see here. The Creed says, let's see. Yeah. Holocrons, Reign of the Axe, Conquest,
Soldier,
Peace,
unregulated religious order ruling the galaxy.
I was looking at the Book of the Sith. Sorry, I've got the wrong text. Here we go. Here's the right one.
Nice one.
Let's see here.
Oh, here it is. I found it.
The Jedi Code.
Mark may have found it, but I got to give Garrett credit for the bit. Good find on the book. It worked for me.
Yeah.
All right.
Like the bit, no matter what.
Here, John.
All right. It is. There is no motion. There is peace. There is no ignorance. There is knowledge. There is no passion. There is serenity. There is no chaos. There is harmony. There is no death. There is the Force. And then there is a alternate one that is recited to Jedi younglings. It is emotion yet peace, ignorance yet knowledge, passion yet serenity, chaos yet harmony, death yet the Force.
I like that version better because there demonstrably is chaos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Serenity in chaos could be a good way of putting it.
Absolutely.
Harmony in chaos. I mean, well, let's just start with what we've seen of the Jedi so far in canon. As far as when we're first introduced to them, they're essentially almost nearly extinct. They're
barring extended universe, there's only 2 of them in the whole galaxy when we first.
Yeah, that we know of. At the point that we knew of at the point. Yeah.
And actually, in episode 1, the second one we don't know about. So we don't. As far as episode 4 goes, Obi-Wan is the only galaxy.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Episode.
Which is nice because as far as Obi-Wan knows, I think that's the. I mean, I guess he knows Yoda's there.
Yeah. Well, he knew that Yoda was in exile, but he Yoda was so old by that point, he could have passed away, and
Sure.
and Obi-Wan wouldn't have known, because there was
wasn't
a
updating
reason
space
why
time.
Yoda spent time on Dagobah.
Mhm.
It's because he was hiding and masking himself with the dark side.
Yeah. It's but from the very moment, I mean, you had this. It's hard, not hard, but like trying to compare it to real world analogy of what the Jedi would be. It's almost like seemed to be a little bit of like the old knights of the medieval time, like the Knights Templar or the Knights Hospitaller, with a little bit of Shaolin monk thrown into as far as their belief system.
Well, there's definitely, I mean, if you go back to Lucas's original, idea, his notes, I mean, he was definitely inspired by Kurosawa's films. Seven Samurai, for example, was a masterpiece in filmmaking, and he drew heavy inspiration from that. So there's definitely a samurai-esque quality to the Jedi, at least from that romanticized element. Because I mean,
Yeah.
the samurai were these noble warriors. They were kind of monastic in their ways, not to the same extent as the Jedi became, but that idea of the warrior philosopher is threaded throughout what Lucas has created.
Definitely. And one thing for me, it was really is kind of looking through there, is how when you, especially if you read through history and you read about the fall of the Templars, and it's very similar. The Jedi fall is very similar. Of they become so politically powerful, the Jedi do, that they become a threat to the Sith, and to Palpatine, not just because he's a Sith, but because they're a threat to, and they're able to take this power that they've amassed, and he's able to turn around for them and use it to paint them as the villain.
Well, ultimately, the Jedi are an unregulated force of essential demigods who answer to no one. And they have an unquestioned and unquestioning belief that what they are doing is the correct thing. Now, the way that they justify what they're doing as the correct thing is through the Force, which nobody else can perceive. So you have a religious order enforcing their will on the galaxy, in a sense. And their will is unquestionable. We're right because we say we're right, and you can't prove us wrong, and we can't prove you right. But check out this laser sword. It is a threat, and I think that's why the Jedi were so hesitant to involve themselves in the actual political machinations of the Senate, because it's not fair.
For me, watching the Acolyte, and we can go into other later on whether it was all the other stuff, but is seeing this kind of, you're seeing the beginning of that political, of the Jedi becoming more political in there, where they're talking with each other. You hear the Jedi talking with each other and saying, we have to be careful, because if we do this, that could give an opening to our enemies in the Senate. So they seem to be more worried about upsetting people in the Senate than they are about doing the at least through in the Acolyte. Now you're watching the Acolyte, you're starting to see that where they're worried about if we do this, there's people in the Senate that might use that against us, instead of just worrying about who cares if this person in the Senate gets upset. If it's the right thing to do, we need to do this.
Well, and that's the thing that kind of weirds me on, because what was already established in canon, especially if you watch through the prequel trilogy, while the Jedi were beholden to the Republic and to the Senate, they could take their assignments if they wanted to. Like they weren't commanded by the Senate to do anything, which is weird, because they didn't have to report anything to the Senate. I think that's a little bit of a misnomer, because
I don't think they're saying in the act like
but they're given military ranks.
What?
They didn't get military rank until the Clone Wars.
Yeah, there were Jedi generals in previous wars of the Old Republic, like especially like if you go back a few thousand years, but like during the wars against the Sith, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years before the Battle of Yavin and all that.
But they're commanding other Jedi, right?
What?
They were commanding other Jedi at that time.
Yeah, they were commanding other Jedi. They weren't
in the Clone Wars. They're commanding non-Jedi
orders going to war against each other. Is what it came down to.
As opposed to General Kenobi in charge of all these clones, and Commander Ahsoka.
Yeah.
And it was more of it's much different than what they were meant to be, which is kind of interesting, because like going back to the samurai references, like the samurai were kind of like that. Like the samurai were meant to serve a greater purpose and to provide peace and stability, but then you started having these daimyo and shogun popping up all over feudal Japan, and it was kind of like the War of the Roses on steroids, because like if you've watched Shogun, that whole series, or read the book, it's all based on that same idea, that same principle of these different factions, these different clans, and fighting against each other, and different competing ideologies. And that is a little bit more political. The Jedi didn't really have the same political aspirations, but when you're trying to stop another religious sect from trying to domineer the galaxy and impose their will and impose slavery instead of freedom, you can see how that can get easily misconstrued in some other fashion.
That's the other thing that I found fascinating, and I know, going back to the Acolyte, was this kind of idea that of the Jedi being very leery of any other group that was force sensitive groups. There's this, I think it was in the second or third episode, when they find the two sisters, where they say the Republic has outlawed the teaching of anybody with the teaching of force ability.
So my question is, why the Republic outlawed?
They kind of
that's
one thing I don't get.
It doesn't mean that the Jedi have to abide by that. Because I mean, what if you have?
But if you're thinking about it, why wouldn't the Jedi? Like, why wouldn't they say, like, yeah, we want the monopoly on anybody who's force sensitive, that we should be the only ones who train them?
See, I get where you're coming from at that, but like,
it's problematic.
What if you have any like splinter groups that branch off? I mean, look at Qui-Gon Jinn, for example. He frequently did his own thing, follow the natural path of the Force. He was the hippie of the Jedi, and frequently went and did his own thing, and that's why he was ousted from the council. We get hints of this, but then he
cheated a local businessman out of his rightful winnings.
But that's beyond the edge of the Republic. That's Outer Rim. That's Hutt territory. Let the Hutts deal with that.
That's right.
He also left that kid's mother in slavery. The Jedi desire to bring order and peace to the galaxy is commendable and admirable, and ultimately impossible, because for one thing, there's no lawful good definition of objective good. And Qui-Gon was on Tatooine and freed Anakin from slavery, but left his mother. And logistically, that's what he could do. He did the best he could, but nonetheless, the Jedi as an order, and also in microcosm individually, in many ways allowed that sort of thing to happen. They know slavery exists, they allow it. They know drug trade exists, they allow it. Kenobi tells Elon Sleaze Bogano, which is really that character's name, tells him, you don't want to sell death sticks, you want to go home and rethink your life. Okay, but like there's a whole this speaks to, there's an entire industry of selling this addictive chemical on Coruscant under the Jedi's noses if we're really seeking to bring peace and justice to the galaxy. there's just not enough of you.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing is that it goes back to the old adage of how do you policy morality into being? Because for example, our local municipal government, our city council had an issue pop up earlier, right towards the end of February, going into March, where we had a coffee shop open up just a block and a half or 3 blocks from my house, where the baristas are wearing, let's just say, less than appropriate clothing choices, less than 100 feet from a preschool.
Oh my gosh, who would do that? And what would their website be?
We'll talk about that off the air. But it raised a huge fervor at a city council meeting, and the city council stance is we cannot legislate morality. What we can do is if they are in violation of some municipal code, we can fine them and we can then shut them down. And ultimately, it's come down to they're going to get shut down eventually because they're not making enough money. Whatever the novelty is, it's worn off, and people are in the community are just like, we're not going to buy this. And they're
you can't legislate morality, and this is maybe too much of a real world debate, but who is to say what is immoral? To some people, one form of intoxicant is moral, and one is immoral. And who's to say? And generally, in most human societies, the intoxicant that is approved is often a sacrament, and any other intoxicant is demonized. For example, when's the last time you saw a beer commercial? Was it within the last hour? Because I did. On the other hand, other intoxicants that are not taxed or traditionally have not been it's a crime and a gateway drug. So it's impossible to legislate morality, right?
Right. Well, and what's kind of interesting is you look at talking about religious orders and legislating morality. You look at the Mormon Church as a whole, and I'm not trying to get all religious or anything here, but they have what's called the Word of Wisdom, where it was for the longest time, you can't drink coffee, you can't drink hot teas or dark teas or anything like that. No caffeinated beverage, although for some reason chocolate milk and hot cocoa were perfectly good.
A lot of root beer and Sprite.
Yeah. But then you have this policy, and the policy kicked in back before Joseph Smith died, because his wife and the wives of all of his buddies got sick and tired of cleaning up the spittoons and all the glasses from the shots of whiskey that they were taking and all that other stuff. So he's like, well, you know what? I just don't want my wife to complain at me. Wife, be quiet. Here's the new rule for everybody to follow, which he never followed it. But the rest of the church was required to do so. They legislated that into policy and to control morality. Ironically enough, you look at the state of Utah as a whole, per capita, they have a higher substance abuse per capita than any other state in the United States.
Which, if I may, segues nicely into all of the things the Jedi forbid. I think I can make a strong case that Anakin Skywalker would not have fallen to the dark side if he had been able to go to his mentor and friend and say, look, I fell in love with Padme and she is pregnant. What do I do? Yeah. The Jedi have a lot in common with the Harry Potter wizarding world, in that there's only one punishment. You're fired. Yeah. So Anakin feared if he got removed from the Jedi Temple, we know Anakin knows what else there is out there. And as we discussed from a previous episode, when you get kicked out of the Jedi Temple, you lose access to all your friends, where you live, all your transportation. You are homeless, penniless, and none of your friends can talk to you anymore. And so, yes, of course, he's going to hide this. And it was the hiding it that made it a problem. If Anakin could have just gone to Kenobi, or even just the Jedi Council, to be like, look, I messed up.
It's interesting. There's stuff that pops up in the comics, in the Clone Wars comics, where Kenobi seems to know.
Oh, I know Kenobi knew.
I mean, it's hinted at throughout Episode 3. It's hinted at throughout the comics and the novel.
I'm almost sure.
How could he not? He's a telepath.
Well, true.
Well, and there's in the last season of the final season of Clone Wars. There's there I think it was the episode Bad Batch, the Bad Batch episode where he's in the barracks talking with Padme, and Obi-Wan's waiting outside, and he comes out and says, "Tell Padme I said hello."
Yeah,
I was like, and that look just like, oh,
of course he
knew.
Even if we assume that Anakin is shielding the truth from Obi-Wan through the Force, even if he had that mastery, which I don't think it's shown that Anakin has that level of telepathic control.
He didn't have the maturity to do that.
But Padme doesn't.
I can guarantee there was at least 3 people that knew about Anakin and Padme. Obi-Wan knew, Ahsoka knew, Yoda knew.
No,
I think a couple of clones in there. Someone standing watch for those two.
I think Yoda was just there's a few.
How could he not? There's a second heartbeat inside Padme.
And I think he was waiting for Anakin to say something.
Second and third.
He was just
I think
waiting.
I like that theory.
There's that thing where he's
really
talking.
like
I think
theory.
it was episode 3, where Anakin is talking with Yoda, asking for advice, and you could almost see Yoda looking at it, going like,
"Say it.
I'm right here.
Just say it.
Tell me.
Just be honest.
You're going to be okay."
The only possible result of Anakin confessing, as far as Anakin knows, is that he will be excommunicated.
Yeah.
And
now,
why would Yoda think that he should?
I think if he would have told Yoda and if he would have told Obi-Wan, I don't think he. Now, if he would have told Mace,
Mace would
have
been
like,
"Don't
kill
you're
out.
You're out, mother."
I think it's interesting to speak a little bit to you're losing all your friends and stuff. Jedi come to the temple so young, and it's such a known thing. In the Clone Wars cartoon, is it Greedo or I forget who, but a bounty hunter kidnaps Force-sensitive children.
That was Cad.
Bane.
Cad.
Bane.
And he just shows up and says, "I'm here for your kid. I understand they have special abilities." And it's such a known thing in the galaxy. They don't even ask him for ID. They're just like, "Here you go.
Oh, here's their kid."
And that is a very strange role. And I think they mentioned something about that recently in The Acolyte. Like, how could you kill her? She's a child. Well, you brought her here. Yeah. And that's an interesting role that, Ahsoka Tano is canonically 14 years old when they drop her into the middle of a war zone to introduce herself to her new master. It speaks to perhaps the growing corruption of the Jedi. And like we see that all of this in hindsight. We see where the Jedi got to the point that they were easy enough to topple that one man could do it. And, not just any man. But I think I would really like to see through the history of the Jedi how they got to. I can't help but imagine the whittling down of tenets, like what's acceptable. Well, we can't eliminate slavery in the galaxy because that'll put 500 worlds into poverty because their economy is based on it. All right. So maybe slavery's okay, like in some cases. And you're like, Jabba the Hutt is such a bad gangster. Everybody in the whole galaxy knows him. But he employs a lot of people, and we don't really have we don't have the manpower to go to war against him and the whole Hutt cartel. So it's okay. I think it would be interesting to see how the Jedi got to that point. Well, because they talk about compassion, but they don't demonstrate it. At least not when we see.
Yeah. What's interesting is I'm looking at the Jedi path here, and there's a section. One of the they've got it broken down in sections. Part 2 is the Jedi Initiate, and they talk about the 3 pillars of the Jedi, which are the Force, knowledge, and self-discipline. And I think this is kind of an interesting element because this is what it says. It's written by Scarf Vonk, a Jedi battle master. It says many of you are all too eager to rush into the field of knowledge, but this is where you get to swing a lightsaber. But it is called the 3rd pillar for a reason. Until you have demonstrated your connection to the Force and your willingness to study and learn, you will never be admitted to my class. For those of you who have passed that test, you will do well to remember that this pillar is self-discipline, not combat. It is impossible to wield a lightsaber without first mastering the action of your physical self. This is why we give initiates training sabers. by the time you build a real blade as a Padawan, you should have enough skill to not cut off your own arm, or in my case, almost impale my own head.
I caught myself a pretty good clip on the side of the head practicing the other day.
But the point that I think this makes, especially as it goes into like the different like the Form 1 style of lightsaber combat, and then talking about the initiate trials to make it to the Padawan level, the focus on that self-discipline has nothing to do with any extension beyond what you're going to do with weapon. It doesn't extend beyond your interpersonal skills, or how you conduct yourself with other beings throughout the galaxy. You look at other religious organizations, and like Buddha, for example, and they talk about self-discipline, but that self-discipline is mirrored by compassionate behavior and trying to take things as they come, and creating a balancing act as best as you possibly can with the decisions you make and those individuals that you interact with.
Yeah,
I think the Jedi saying a little bit of that.
Is the Jedi a religious order?
That's hard.
It's not a faith system. I mean, it's objectively real. The Force exists.
If you think about it, though, I mean, there's a lot of overlap between the spiritualism of the Jedi as it was initially because it goes from being an idea to being an institution. Once it's an institution, it becomes a religious order. They are the Jedi Order.
Yeah.
And while they don't necessarily go into what we would consider traditional worship practices with regards to the Force, they're not singing songs and kumbaya and praying. They are doing meditation. But the meditation is more for focus and self-discipline than anything else. But there is a religious order, and their religious order is meant, like the key element of their worship is to bring justice, to create a sense of balance. The problem is, like, they can, like, if you look at the point of where things are during the Clone Wars, how many thousands of Jedi are there versus the number of Sith? Ryan, you brought this up when we were talking about Palpatine a couple of weeks ago, and even last week with Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, where you've got, how balanced is that when you've got two itty bitty Sith, which one of them is trying to gain control of the entire galaxy, which we'll just kind of ignore that for a moment. But you got two Sith versus thousands of Jedi.
10,000.
10,000.
10,000.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, if the Sith had been allowed to propagate, on that spiritual level, or even, physically or whatever they do when they initially were a much larger organization, like, that would be a little bit more balanced. The only problem is then you've got two competing organizations, and then to stop the infighting, you have the rule of two that gets attributed in the Sith, which
did nothing to stop the infighting. It just narrowed it down.
It did narrow it down, but it stopped like massive infighting to just like interpersonal infighting. But whereas with the Jedi, it's not about trying to achieve all this glory and all this power. For them, the philosophical element is teaching the next generation. It's always about that intergenerational communication.
We are what they grow beyond.
Exactly. Whereas with the Sith, it goes in a completely not chaotic, but definitely a more unhealthy direction.
You really need to be a true believer in the Sith to actually be an effective Sith Lord, because if you don't want to be defeated by your apprentice, you don't teach them everything.
Yeah.
As opposed to the Jedi, your apprentice is ostensibly going to defend you throughout your career. Of course you want him to know everything, because he's not a threat. He's not your ultimately one of you will kill the other. You would prefer to be the one who is killing rather than being killed. And I think the true tragedy of the Jedi is what an architecture they had of that sort of beautiful interplay of the telepathic communion between two people whose lives depend on each other time and time again. And that's the tragedy of seeing that relationship break between Kenobi and Skywalker. And even more, the tragedy of seeing Yoda experience Order 66. Because every extant Jedi who was killed in Order 66, Yoda has known them, canonically has known them since they were infants. And you have to assume he feels them all die.
Yeah.
That's some of my favorite acting in episode 3 is the CGI representation of Yoda clutching his chest, just feeling everyone he's known and loved for the last 900 years die.
Yeah. And I think one of the crucial things about the Jedi is that they are definitely about interconnectedness. But I do think that Palpatine's description of them being dogmatic is an apt description, because if they weren't so dogmatic, if they weren't so legalistic in how things play out, I think it would have prevented Anakin from falling to the dark side, because in a number of ways. But if you look at Quinlan Vos, for example, Quinlan Vos teeters on the edge of the dark side frequently throughout the Clone Wars. In fact, he is the only Jedi who is able to walk away and wield a red-bladed saber. In fact, the Order, when he came back from his missions being a double and triple agent within the Separatists and all that, and working with Dooku and Ventress, and it probably pops up in Dark Disciple as well. You look at
extensively.
He's the only Jedi who walks away with that red saber, and he's asked to put it down to get rid of the crystal, and he's like, "No, this is my reminder that I crossed a line, and to never do it again." And he, because of
I don't know if I buy that. I think it would have been better to get rid of it.
But the other part of that is the way he was used as a spy, as a double and triple agent. He is like, I feel like it was one of those moments where it shows the worst side of the Jedi, because they allowed him to be manipulated by them. They allowed him to be manipulated by Dooku and ostensibly, by Palpatine, and he got really messed up. And
Yoda was very dubious about that process in Dark Disciple. There's some debate amongst the Jedi Council is, should we be doing this?
Well, I think one of the things we see, especially we see it in, before the clone, early on in episode 1 and episode 2, and they even mention about the arrogance of the Jedi. This sort of feeling that they were untouchable, that there was, again, we see it a little bit in the Acolyte, where this idea that there's, who's going to, who can stop a Jedi? Who can stand, these almost godlike beings.
Well, but even Qui-Gon said, "I wish that were true." When Anakin says nobody can kill a Jedi, he's like, no, that can happen. And which is great foreshadowing for his demise, because he's the he's the one who is real about it. He recognizes the fact that he is just as mortal and just as easily unalivable as anyone else.
Yeah.
I had forgotten that about them letting Voss keep his red saber, because Voss is, for those of you who don't know, Voss is accomplished in psychometry. He can touch an object and see through the Force the physical history of that object. That's how Dooku turns him against Ventress in Dark Disciple, as he presents him with the lightsaber of his master, and he sees that Ventress is the one that killed his master. The names elude me at the moment, but for him to keep that saber every time he picks it up, he is aware of every crime he's committed with it. So I think that is a point.
I want to say it was Master Tolm.
I think you're right.
Let me check just a moment.
Dark Disciple makes me cry, so I haven't read it in a little while.
His So he had his Jedi Master was Master Thulm. His dark side tutelage was under Asajj Ventress. His Sith Master was Darth Tyrannus. And then his own apprentice was Aayla Secura.
Oh, wow. I have to say, I made a meme. Do you remember what planet Aayla Secura is on when Order 66 is executed? Felucia. I made a meme. It's a picture of her being gunned down, and the caption is "Bye, Felucia." Bye, Felucia.
Oh, that's so bad.
Yeah, I get reported a lot, actually. Like, why would you? It's funny. I'd come join me on the Sith Art Library and Archives, where I share that sort of bad taste.
Wow.
Oh man.
My favorite one of those, Garrett. I have one that I share every Easter,
wow,
which is it's like a art station portrait of Maul, and he's like, whoever drew it has a crush on Maul. Like, he looks gorgeous, and he's just like cut and handsome and whatnot. And I say he died for his beliefs and returned to life, but 80% will not share Darth Maul for Easter. Because kinda when he died in 99, we didn't know he wasn't dead. So there was a period where we were like, oh, he's back. Why seek ye the living amongst the dead? Indeed.
That's funny.
Wow.
Well, overall, if I may, I'm not a Jedi guy. In fact, I always joke, folks, that I've developed a speech impediment over decades of Palpatine cosplay, and that I can't pronounce the word without saying a Jedi. But I love the mythology that they created, and I love the shattering tragedy of their fall, because so much of it was preventable. And you talk about how, they became dogmatic, and in many cases they were dogmatic because they were encouraged by Palpatine. He was the one who pushed them to excommunicate Ahsoka based on the accusation of murder. And like, again, Ahsoka is a Jedi. You guys are telepaths. You could tell if she's lying or not, but nobody bothers. They just kick her out. And it's because Palpatine is like, oh, you got to do this. I mean, you really kind of... And because of that, again, as we've said, Ahsoka's absence in Episode 3 is pivotal in Palpatine's ability to turn Anakin. So I love that. Like, in character, I'm a Sith guy, but as a human being who I prefer my evil to be fictional, I gotta say, I love the history and the poetry of the Jedi Order, what they should have been, what they were one time, what they stopped being, and how they fell, and what they may one day be again. I can't wait to see what they do with the next arc. I think it's going to be great. I'm excited to see more of the High Republic. I wasn't really into it until I started watching The Acolyte. I don't play video games, so I'm not following the Cal Kestis storyline. But The Acolyte has really brought me on board. I would love to see more of that mythology being created and illustrated for us.
Yeah.
I mean, even as a dark side guy, I'm sorry, one more thing. Even as a dark side guy, when I hear Ewan McGregor recording the message to all Jedi to don't go back to the temple, it moves me. And you read it. It's the opening. It's like the opening quote in The New Dawn. And to imagine what it must have felt like for Obi-Wan Kenobi to say those words and know that everything he has ever loved is gone, and more to know that he had a big part in that fall. It's heartbreaking, and I think it's poetry. It's one reason. One reason I'll always be a Star Wars fan is that there's simply no equivalent musicality in any science fiction franchise that I follow.
Yeah. We're all right. That's been a really good discussion, really good talk.
Yeah.
Of course, next week will be our character profile, and since we're talking about the Jedi, we're going to be talking about Luke Skywalker, one of my favorite characters. And it would be really interesting to talk about Luke and kind of as fans, our journey with Luke throughout the years.
In only 39 minutes, I don't know if we can make it.
But with that being said, Garrett, why don't you tell the people out there where they can find you at?
Well, you guys can find me on Instagram and X at GKJ_publishing, where I talk about my books, The Archives of the St. Quran. It's a 5-book series so far on fantasy, high fantasy. Stupid AI trying to talk to me at the same time. I also talk about my show The Right Way. It's a channel on YouTube where I discuss book recommendations, author interviews, and I do creative writing tips. I have a new episode coming out this Saturday, and then I will be doing a live stream on the 13th. Yes, 13th. And then 2 weeks after that, I will have my season 6 finale with the second annual Righties Awards. Awards given out to my best guest host, my best author interview, and my best marathon interview.
Awesome. What about you, Brian?
I would invite everyone out there to come see us at the Sith Library and Archives on Facebook. It's a curated collection of Sith philosophy, art, culture, and, as we saw earlier, tacky humor. So come on out and see us at the Sith Library and Archives. I post as Darth Corosis, the only thing I ever wrote in 8th grade that I still like.
All right.
Bad poetry.
As for us, yes. As for us here at War of the Stars, you can get a hold of us. Our Instagram is at War of the Stars 1. That is also our handle on X. It is also our email address, warofthestars1@gmail.com. Oh, by the way, the Instagram is war_of_the_stars1. Just remember that. And our YouTube is, of course, at SWChild. That is where you can find my other show, Star Wars Through the Eyes of a Child, where myself and my 9-year-old daughter, Cecily, she will be called Cecily now, are going through the Clone Wars in chronological order. And we're also going to be doing some unboxing and toy building. We got some Star Wars toys that we're going to be building and putting together. So that'll be a lot of fun. In fact, we're going to be recording our first one tomorrow. So yeah. Also, if you want to support the show, Ko-fi.com /War of the Stars, or go to Spreadshirt.com /War of the Stars. And you can buy all our cool merch there. Yes, and we're of course a part of GNN. Don't forget to hug your GNN today, as we like to say. Go to our YouTube or the YouTube or Spotify. Just search Geek News Now Official or GNN Official, and check out all the different podcasts on there. And who knows, you might see one of our lovely faces on one of the other shows.
They're lovely faces. I've got a face for radio.
Yes. I wasn't going to say anything,
It's okay. I've come to terms with it, John. I've come to terms with it.
Anyway, that will do it for us right now. As always, remember, this is not just my Star Wars. This is not just your Star Wars. This is our Star Wars. Until next time, may the Force be with you.
Hey, what's this button do?
You will be destroyed.
Sweet.